Changes could be on their way for the XRP ledger in a new amendment. I don't know if it's new necessarily, but it's new to me. I've discovered it and I've taken it upon myself to teach you, learn about it myself. I've put hours into this video, learn about it myself, teach it to you so you can explain it to other people. How cool would that be? So today I want to talk about the atomic batch transactions amendment. Now, I put out a tweet earlier. I wanted to make sure that everyone was actually interested in a video like this, and it turns out that 81% of you actually were. So I've decided to learn about it. I've put hours into this video, kind of building out this explainer for you, and I'm going to get through it all today. If you like this video and you get value from it, please hit subscribe and let's get into it. So I think because there may be some beginners in this watching these videos, we need to really understand what amendments are in the first place. So amendments are just changes that are made, and the changes are being made to the blockchain. So the blockchain we're talking about here is the XRPL. That's the blockchain that the token XRP runs on. And really, amendments on the XRP ledger are like updates to a video game. They make it run better. They can add new stuff like new features or fix any of the problems. And overall, once you add lots of amendments and you do amendments over time, you get a better and safer environment for the thing to work on. So much like games, they add updates, they add new features, new characters and stuff, and they make the game better over time. Amendments are basically the same thing. So the purpose of these amendments is really to enhance the features that are on there. It's just like, updating an app, as I've said right here. Oops, sorry. As I've said right here. You can also improve the security of everything and protect the network from hackers. Also, the systems that are built underneath, they're called protocols. It's like a system, a step-by-step system that is followed. That's what a protocol is. A protocol optimization to make the blockchain just work better and more efficiently. And then you've got governance and consensus, basically ensuring that decisions are made democratically. And that's really what amendments need in order to be put through. So basically, you have a system by which these amendments operate. There's a protocol for getting these things put into reality. So the first stage of things is a proposal. Then it moves on to a review stage. That's just to see if everyone involved thinks it's a good idea. They then vote, and if most agree, and the score we look for is 80% yay rate, I mean upvote, within 2 weeks, has to remain at 80% for 2 weeks. That is the voting stage. And then the new rule starts and everyone has to follow it, or they can't play. Well, or they can't be involved in the XRPL, and that is the activation. That's when it's actually turned on. Now, when we look at the status of this amendment specifically, I couldn't find it. I couldn't find the status of this whole thing. But you can go onto the XRPL website. There's a website right here. It's the GitHub. It's the XLS 50D atomic blah 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 atomic batch transactions amendment. And you might be able to just get updates on there. There's also a place on the XRPL Foundation website that shows you all of this in terms of like the activation, what part of this process these things are on. And so in this report that I've generated, now that we've got that base understanding of what an amendment is, this is going to explain how they are different to something else that sounds similar on the XRPL, which is actually active, called payment channels. We're going to get into who it's going to benefit the most, what business opportunities could this all create, and finally, how could this all increase the value of XRP? Because I think a lot of us, that's what we're interested in, right? So let's get into it. So atomic, I don't know why I've got loads of these spaces here. So atomic or batch transactions allow multiple transactions to be packaged together and executed as a single operation on the XRPL. So this ensures atomicity. Atomicity, yes. Meaning all the included transactions either succeed together or fail together. And that eliminates scenarios of where only a portion of the transactions would execute. And that would obviously create an inconsistent ledger state. what all of that means is atomicity is when transactions happen all at once. You know, that it happens all at once from all areas. And so ultimately, in order to eliminate the almost the record getting disjointed and messed up, you want atomicity because it can do it all at once, and it kind of either happens or it doesn't. It's very like binary in that way. It either succeeds or it fails, rather than some succeeding, some failing, and then it creating this really bad record system. So within the code, and this is really for the developers, but I think this is giving you a foundational understanding that is really interesting, and just really important for you to know. You can either have an all atomicity, an only one atomicity, and a batch atomicity, and let's explain each one of those. So these different types dictate how transactions within a batch are actually processed. So for all, that means every transaction must succeed for the batch to be applied. That's that all or nothing thing that we talked about earlier. Then only one is only the first successful transaction is applied, ignoring subsequent ones. Then you've got batch, which is transactions are processed in order until a failure occurs, with successful ones being applied. And so I don't understand the differences between those really, fundamentally, as from a developer perspective, because I'm not. But it seems like there would be benefit to having those different variations for different use cases. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting, because the fee structure is slightly different. So the fees for atomic or batch transactions are calculated as twice the base fee plus the cumulative fees of the individual transactions within the batch. So as you'll know, within a batch of transactions, there are multiple transactions that need to go through. So we're going to go through this just to show you here as an example. So let's first assume that we have 3 transactions in a batch of transactions with their respective fees underneath as well. So this is additional to the base fee, right? So the base fee for any transaction is 10 drops. And so when we look at this, we have 3 transactions. Additional to the 10 drops per transaction, we have 5 drops, 10 drops, 8 drops. These things can vary. These like additional fees can vary. Let's get into that actually. Yeah, I'm just going to go down here quickly. Different actions that you take with those transactions can vary in the additional transaction specific fee that you get. So the transaction fees can be different at different times of the day, if it's busier or not. As also if you wanted to make a trade or you wanted to set up an account, like all these transactions on the XRPL they have different fees associated with them. So when we're calculating when we're calculating the fees for this atomic batch transactions transaction, that's kind of weird. First, we want to twice the base fee, so that would be 2 times 10 drops, which equals 20 drops. Then we're going to take the sum of all the transaction fees, which would be 5 drops, 10 drops, 8 drops. Remember, these are arbitrary; they're not solid numbers, but just shows how they can vary depending on the transactions. So then you've got the total base fee. The total fee is twice the base fee plus the sum of transactional fees. The total fees would be 20 drops plus 23 drops, equaling 43 drops. So it cost 43 drops to send that transaction, or those 3 transactions as a batch. Now, when we compare that to a transaction where you do 3 transactions without the amendment, you start to see a little difference here. So because you're now doing all of these separately, you've got transaction 1, which is 10 drops, which is the base fee, plus the transaction specific fee, which, as I mentioned, different tasks have different fees associated. Transaction 1 would cost 15 drops, 2 would cost 20 drops, and 3 would cost 18 drops. So when you get into the total cost without the amendment, you end up with 53 drops versus the 43 drops. Now I was thinking, whoa, there's even a cost saving. That's amazing. And then I realized what a drop is. A drop is, there are 1 million drops in 1 XRP. So saving 10 drops on this example transaction really is so insignificant, it cannot possibly be about saving fees. It can't possibly be about reducing costs of using the system, because I calculated if you have a $1 XRP and you want to send $1 million, it ends up being like 0.000001 cent in terms of difference between the atomic batch transaction fee and the normal fee that you would pay without the amendment. So it really makes no difference in terms of cost, but savings isn't the point, as I've written here. I don't know why this has all been messed up. So why is there this difference? Well, when you send a bunch of transactions together on the network, it uses computer power and space, right? So you're using a system, it costs to use the system, the fees need to be covered. The network charges a fee for this, adding up to a basic charge plus extra for transactions in the group. So there's the base and then the extra for the special use cases that you're trying to do. Now, this is a balance. We're not making it about cost savings. They've just structured it in a way where it can save money. It could also be more as well, depending on the specific nature of the transactions you're actually trying to send. But really, you can't create a really cheap system to function, because what happens is you end up getting spam. And so what people will do if it's too cheap is they'll send too many transactions and it will slow down the network for everyone. So it's actually a balance. It's like you don't want them to be too cheap, because then everyone will use it and it gets a bit crazy. But you want it to be cheap enough to where it's worth using, right? So there's a balance between the speed of the network and the price or the cost of sending those transactions. I think the XRPL has done that really well. I think the transactions are so minimal that it doesn't really matter, and it maintains this balance. So I want to compare it to another system that I've seen used, and that is the payment channels. Now you can actually watch a video of the payment channels thing. They explain it on the XRPL. There's a YouTube channel that talks about it. It's actually an XRPL channel. And you can watch that whole video about the different payment features that the XRPL has currently running. One of those is payment channels, where if you read them basically straightforward, they look like this amendment, this batch amendment, and the payment channels look exactly the same, but they're not exactly the same. So let's differentiate the two. So payment channels let two people send lots of small XRP payments quickly and cheaply directly. I need to highlight that. Not directly on their XRPL's main record. But atomic batch transactions do work on the main XRPL record, and they group transactions to make sure they all happen together or not at all. So very simply put, payment channels do small, simple transactions, not on the XRPL main record, and atomic batch transactions do large, complex transactions on the XRPL record. And so it gets it really into this question of, okay, all that theory is interesting, but who does it benefit? Like what is the point in this? What difference does it actually make? Well, what you'll end up having is lots of developers and entrepreneurs making new businesses because they can now build these advanced financial apps, which we're going to talk about in a second, just below here. Then you've also got the use case for all the trading platforms, the exchanges, the DEXs, the banks even. And they can create these new systems as well for trading and making payments as well, and doing all of that reliably. Then you've got also regular users who, if you have your own special need for creating these complex transactions, and you want to save a bit less, which is really not a thing, just because the fees are so small, then you could use this as well. But we're really interested in what businesses could take advantage of this whole amendment. Now, the two that I narrowed it down to, I know these are pretty big areas, but we've got DeFi and FinTech. Now, I'm going to read out these specific use cases, and you are going to think, what? That already exists, but it doesn't, and I'll tell you why in a second. So DeFi platforms will be able to build these smarter exchanges with conditional trades. Okay, imagine trading and smart contracts. Okay, I'll leave that there. And that allows users to set trades that only go through if the price hits a certain point. Now, that's the part that you'll all be thinking, well, isn't that just trading? Like you set a limit order, and when the price hits a certain level, it takes an action. Yes, but no. And that's what I'm going to get into. DeFi could also start creating really complex financial tools that only work under specific conditions. So, for example, developing savings accounts that unlock funds only after reaching a set goal. So now we're getting into this realm of like automation with money. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean trading, but it could be within there. You hit a certain savings amount, or your account goes to $2,000 and it automatically distributes $50 to another savings account or something like that. And then you've got fintech, who can now offer secure payment holding services. So they could potentially create a service that holds the funds safely until both a buyer and a seller agree to release them. So, for example, buying a house, you could have, it's almost like an escrow. It's almost like an escrow, but it's more automated and smarter than an escrow. Buyers put their money into there. You wait for something else to happen, like a deed to be uploaded, and it just executes like that. So it's almost like smart contract functionality without smart contracts. Really interesting. And it's a bit more complex than escrow, which is a feature that operates kind of similarly, but on a simple way. Then we could also develop, this is really interesting to me. So fintech companies could now develop these like really smart automated trading strategies. So you could potentially set up a system that buys stocks automatically when the prices drop to a specific level and sells when they rise. Now you're thinking, that's just take profit and stop loss. That's just taking profits along the way and setting a buy order lower than you are. Yes, but it's not. And that's what I want to get into. So these conditional trades could encompass any of these, and these are kind of what I've been thinking here about this. So one way you could use them is for these complex conditions. So this would be trades based on various factors rather than just price. Now your mind is exploding. So, for example, this is something that I've talked about at length as being something that we need to do manually for our exit strategy. And I talk about this in my workshop. Link is in the description. When we're looking at selling or taking profits, it doesn't have to be about the price. It could be about an event. And that's what this is when we get into external triggers. Trades influenced by outside events like economic changes. So let's say an event is there's a rate cut in the interest, the Fed does a rate cut. What if that was the trigger to take profits on a completely different asset? This is where it gets really interesting, because now you've got, okay, time-based triggers, which I'm upon learning about this, it's kind of blown my mind, and I'm going to add a module now to the workshop, because I talk about this specifically, how manually you'll either have to look at an event and take profits at that event, but you have to predetermine that event in your mind. Then you've also got like a date, like, they say, sell in May, go away in crypto. Well, what if you wanted to sell in May? With this amendment, you could do complex things like that. Like at this time on this day, or when this event happens, when Elon Musk goes on to Saturday Night Live, trigger a sell on these different assets. That is way cooler than just, I'm selling at $5. So you have price-based exit points, you have time-based exit points, and you have event-based exit points. And I talk about this on the workshop before I found this out. So I'm going to have to re-record a section now to add this in. And then what if you wanted to have a system where when this event happens and the price for XRP is at this price and Bitcoin is at this price and it's after April, for example, you could do that with this system. So orders needing multiple conditions to be met all at once in order for that thing to happen. It's basically like this it's like a website or a service online called if this then that, IFTTT. So if this happens, then this happens. It's a smart contract, right? It's smart contract functionality, but specifically you could incorporate this into an exchange or your banking system where certain things happen upon certain events happening. And you could automate all of that yourself. The system also updates, the system updates orders automatically based on new data or trends. So for example, you could have it to where, you know, I only want to sell my house, or I only want to put my house on the market or put my deed onto the blockchain, you know, to be tokenized when house prices in this area increase by 10%. You know, it is smart contract functionality without smart contracts. And so these conditional trades are super cool. And as we continue to learn more about this, we're going to figure out just the limits and the ability of this thing. Because I'm speaking off the top of my mind. Like, I'm not an expert at this, and I completely welcome experts to contribute what they understand to be true. But when I think about conditional trades, these are the things I think about. And it seems like these kind of atomic or batch transactions with their kind of increased functionality do all of these things. And so I'm wondering, like, in the end, what is a smart contract? Smart contracts really are just if this then that. So it's really trying to really understand if this went through, if this amendment went through, and we did get these like conditional trade capabilities from the amendment, really what is the difference between a smart contract now and that? But we're all here because we want to know what it could mean for XRP. So before we get into it, if you enjoyed this video and you like this style as well, because I've been making these reports, I don't quite have a website yet, but when I do have a website, all of these reports will go onto the website so you can refer back to them. But we're all here basically because we're interested in what it could do for XRP. And I think I've narrowed it down to these kind of 4 things. All of them obviously relating or reverting back to the idea that they just increase their XRPL value or XRP value. So we've got the increase in capability on decentralized exchanges. So there's better trading on DEXs. You know, you can have this conditional functionality in there on a DEX, means more users and more trades using XRP, increasing the XRP value. I think, you know, ultimately what we look for here is increased use case for XRP and increased use of the XRPL. These are things we want for the network to grow. And as it grows, it becomes more desirable, meaning more people are going to buy XRP to keep it as a store of value because they see more people using it. Therefore, the price goes up because there's less tokens in circulation. If that's all complicated, just stick with me and stick with this channel, because at some point all of those things will go in if you're not understanding right now. Then you've got the complex financial products, obviously with this smart transaction condition thing that you can do. That will increase the amount of innovative financial tools using XRP, therefore increasing the XRP value. The cross-border payment efficiency, you can group these payments together, meaning it's faster, cheaper global transfers with XRP, increasing the XRP value. And then you've got this smart contract-like features. These conditional transactions mean there's an expanded use for XRP and the XRPL, and it mimics smart contracts, increasing the XRPL value. I hope you've enjoyed that all, of course. And, you know, I've mentioned my exit strategy course a few times in here, but it really is fundamentally, it changes the game for you if you don't have a solid plan. And I would say, even if you think you do have a solid plan, it's not as solid as the plan you would create in the workshop. It's absolutely risk off. So there's no risk for you. If you go through all the modules, go through all the lessons, if you don't get value from that, you know, you can have your money back. There's a 30-day money back guarantee. The exit strategy workshop, link in the description. Stay emotionless. I'll see you in the next one.